So I fast forward in my life to March 2011. My husband and I have suffered through 5 deployments, he being the one deployed. I had lost my sister the year before to esophageal cancer, and my then 17-year-old son was completely out of control. And that night of March 2011, we were stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, living on the outskirts, and my niece had come to visit from California. And it was always with my son at that age in his life, it was one thing that would be said that would set him off. And I don't remember what was said that night. It could be, the sky is black. It's 9 o'clock at night, and he would get mad and he would start a fight. And that fight that night turned physical because he got in my face and my husband stood up to defend me. And so there was a physical altercation between them, and I remember screaming to my niece, call 911, call 911, and she wouldn't do that. She was too afraid. She retreated to her bedroom, and we took the fight out into the garage. And I remember being out there, and the garage door is open, and the bright lights are on out in the garage, and we're just screaming at each other. And at one point, it just became too much for me, and I told my son, just leave. I don't want you to be here. Go. And at this point, it's about 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night. It's pitch black outside, and he walked off. And I remember walking into the bathroom, and my husband stayed in the garage, and I remember seeing him grab a sleeping bag, and I thought, well, that's on you if you want to sleep out in the garage, but I'm going in the house. And I walked into the house, and I walked into my bathroom, and I remember looking at myself in the bathroom mirror, and I thought, what good are you doing in this world, You've kicked your son out of the house when it's pitch black outside. What are you really doing that's good in this world? And he had just recently gotten out of a rehab, and he was having difficulty sleeping, and they gave him some sleeping pills, and we kept them in our bathroom. And I remember looking at that bottle, and I remember thinking to myself, I will not be the coward that my mom is, always threatening to take her life and never having the guts to do it. And I grabbed that bottle that had approximately 75 to 80 sleeping pills in it, and I ingested the whole thing. And I started to walk out of the bedroom into the living room, and I just fell down to the tile floor. And then I started throwing up. And I could hear my husband's footsteps pacing, and I could hear him talking. And I just remember thinking I could hear the fear in his voice. I remember I could hear his tears because he was so afraid and so upset. I remember you see it in the movies, or on a TV show when those gurney wheels hit the asphalt, that thud, that noise it makes. And I remember it just it jolted me, and that cold night air hit me. And then I'm immediately swept into these fluorescent lights that are shining down on me. And to the left of me was the emergency room waiting room, and to the right was the doors. And straight in front of me was the admissions desk. And I remember them saying 2 words, intentional overdose. And in that moment, there was so much shame, so much embarrassment for what I felt. And being back there, my husband was by my side. And I remember at one point, I didn't want to make eye contact with him because I was just so ashamed of what I had done. And I looked at him, and I could see the corners of his mouth were turned down. And I remember just thinking how disappointed he must be in me, and how much shame I felt in that moment for what I had done. And so I drank, and that drinking led to other injuries in my life, from isolating myself from my friends. It became about the only way I can say is being mean to my family. I hurt my family in the words that I would say. But then one day I met Carrie, and I met her down on the beach through another friend in Waikiki, and I had an instant connection with her. And so, 2013 at that time, so what do? You friend them on Facebook. And then I saw a post that she had made about her stepson having taken his life by suicide, and that she was going to start an Out of the Darkness community walk in his honor. And I volunteered. I thought I was going to volunteer to run a 5K. That's all I thought it was. And it became about being part of a committee to help. And I remember every week I would go to the meetings The first meeting was at Starbucks, the second one was at her house, and all these people at this table had lost someone to suicide. And I remember I had so much guilt because my husband was sitting next to the person that could have died by suicide, and I didn't, but they had already lost somebody, and that was it. It was their final chapter. And so that night we went across the street to the Dixie Grill and had dinner, and I just sent Carrie a text, and I said, I want to tell you that I'm someone that survived a suicide attempt. And she texted me back, and all she said was, if you need a friend to hold your hand, if you want to tell your story, I will always be there for you. So I continued with volunteering at the walk that year, and that day of the walk, even though I didn't want to go because I was so afraid, I decided, I'd made it this far, I'm going to the walk. So I show up there, and there's a bead color for each mental illness that goes along with it, and mine, for struggling personally, was green. And she came up to me and she said, if you want to wear your green beads, you can, but you don't have to. But if you want to, I'll walk to the table with you. And we walked up to that table together, and I remember we just looked at each other and we cried. And I put them around my neck, and I felt like I publicly finally told everybody that I personally struggle with mental disease, that I have depression issues. I still wear this necklace every day to remind myself of those green beads, that I never forget, that I shouldn't be ashamed and publicly tell my story. And because of doing the walk last year, this year I was able to be a guest speaker at the walk. I was able to share my entire story to a group of people. I've since started a blog to share my not just the negative, but the powerful stories that go along with it, the inspirational stories, how other people have impacted my life to become a better person. And that night, not that night, but in the days that followed, I remember thinking that God kept me alive that night for a reason. And it wasn't until I met Carrie that I was really able to understand that there is a reason, and I'm now seeing that reason why God kept me alive. And being able to be part of this group over these last 2 days has helped me understand how I can actually live that purpose out loud and share my story with others to hopefully help them in preventing death by suicide.